The boardroom felt suffocating as I sat there, watching James pace in front of the projection screen. His expensive suit and perfectly coiffed hair screamed success, while his smirk spoke volumes about how he viewed me, the grieving widow who needed to be managed. "The numbers don't lie," he said, clicking to the next slide. "Since David's passing 6 months ago, our stock has dropped 15%. The market is losing confidence in Quantum Tech's leadership. My name is Rachel Chen, and 6 months ago, I lost my husband to a car accident. Today, I was about to lose his company too, or so my brother-in-law thought. Our shareholders are nervous," James continued, his voice dripping with fake concern. "They're worried about having well, let's be honest here, a housewife controlling 51% of a major tech company." The other board members shifted uncomfortably. They'd known me for years as David's wife, the woman who hosted company parties and attended charity events on his arm. The woman who, as far as they knew, had no technical background, no business experience, no qualifications beyond being married to their brilliant CEO. If only they knew. "Rachel," James turned to me, his expression a masterpiece of condescending concern. "You know David would want what's best for the company. My proposal is more than generous. We'll buy your shares at a premium. You can keep the house, the cars, maintain your lifestyle. But let those of us who understand this industry take control." I looked down at the proposal in front of me, fighting to keep my expression neutral. The generous offer would indeed keep me wealthy, but it would give James complete control of Quantum Tech, the company David and I had built from nothing. "And if I refuse?" I asked quietly. James's smile tightened. "Then I'll be forced to call for a vote of no confidence. The board already supports me. They know you're not qualified to make decisions about quantum computing and AI development." "I see." I closed the folder containing his proposal. "And what about Project Phoenix?" The room went silent. Project Phoenix was Quantum Tech's most closely guarded secret, a revolutionary quantum encryption system that could change the face of cybersecurity. As far as the world knew, it was David's final project, still in development. James' confidence faltered for a moment. "Project Phoenix is proceeding according to schedule." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. "So you understand the modifications I made to the quantum entanglement algorithm last week? The ones that increased efficiency by 40%? His face went blank. Around the table, board members started whispering to each other. "What modifications?" James demanded. "David's original design was flawed," I cut in. "It couldn't scale beyond local networks. The new architecture I implemented allows for global deployment while maintaining quantum coherence." The whispers grew louder. James's face reddened. "You expect us to believe you understand quantum computing? You've never even worked in tech." I smiled, thinking about the past 5 years, about the late nights working alongside David, developing algorithms, solving problems that had stumped the industry's best minds, about our decision to keep my involvement secret, knowing how the tech world would react to a female Asian developer, especially one married to the CEO. "Actually," I said, standing up and walking to the computer connected to the projector, "I've been working in tech for longer than you have, James. I just did it under a different name." I typed quickly, logging into a secure server. The screen filled with code, the core architecture of Project Phoenix. "Do you recognize this coding style?" I asked the board members. "It's remarkably similar to the work of R.C. Wang, isn't it?" The effect was immediate. Everyone in tech knew R.C. Wang, the mysterious developer whose innovations had driven Quantum Tech's success for the past 5 years. The genius who never appeared in public, never gave interviews, communicating only through code commits and technical documentation. "That's impossible," James sputtered. "R.C. Wang is." "Me," I said simply. "Rachel Chen Wang. David and I decided early on that my work would be judged more fairly if people didn't know I was his wife. So we created a persona, the reclusive genius who just happened to collaborate brilliantly with Quantum Tech's CEO." I pulled up more files, years of development logs, emails between David and me discussing technical details, video recordings of us working late in our home office. "David wasn't just my husband," I continued, my voice soft but firm. "He was my partner in every sense. We built this company together. The only difference is he did it publicly while I worked in the shadows. The board members were staring at their tablets, where I just sent copies of all the documentation. James looked like he'd been hit by a truck. "This is a trick," he said weakly. "Some sort of deception. Would you like me to explain exactly how the quantum entanglement modifications work?" I offered. "Or maybe you prefer to discuss the neural network architecture I designed for our AI division, the one you've been taking credit for managing these past 6 months." The next hour in the boardroom was unlike anything anyone present had ever experienced. I walked them through Project Phoenix of architecture, explaining complex quantum computing concepts with the ease of someone who had spent years immersed in the field. With each explanation, each technical detail I elaborated on, James's face grew paler. "But the patents," he finally interrupted, grasping at straws. "They're all in David's name." I pulled up another file. "Actually, they're jointly held. David insisted on it, though I wanted to keep using the R.C. Wong persona." I smiled slightly at the memory. He said someday the world would need to know the truth. Marcus Chen, our head of development and no relation despite the shared surname, leaned forward. "The Quantum Bridge Protocol, that was you. The one that solved our coherence issues." I nodded. "David was brilliant with hardware, but software was always my strength. We complemented each other perfectly. That's why he never fully explained how certain systems worked," Marcus said, realization dawning on his face. "He always deflected to R.C. Wong's documentation." "Because I wrote it," I confirmed. "David and I had an agreement. He handled the public face of the company, the meetings, the presentations. I focused on development, on solving the technical problems that kept us ahead of the competition." James had remained unusually quiet, his eyes darting between me and his tablet. I could almost see the wheels turning in his head, trying to find a way to discredit me. "Even if this is true," he finally said, "running a tech company requires more than just technical knowledge. It needs business acumen, leadership skills." "You mean like the skills I used to negotiate our Series C funding?" I interrupted. "The deal I closed with Vector Capital while using the R.C. Wong persona." More murmurs around the table. The Vector Capital deal had been legendary. A $300 million investment on incredibly favorable terms, negotiated entirely through encrypted communications with the mysterious R.C. Wong. "That's right," I continued. "I handled most of our major deals. The investors actually preferred dealing with R.C. Wong. They said they'd never met someone who understood both the technical and business sides so completely." I clicked to a new slide showing our company's growth over the past 5 years. Every major innovation, every significant breakthrough, they all came after R.C. Wong joined the company, after I started working with David. "This is absurd," James snapped, finally losing his composure. "You expect us to believe that all this time, while you were playing the perfect corporate wife, hosting dinner parties and charity events, you were secretly some kind of tech genius." "No," I said calmly. "I expect you to look at the evidence in front of you and make a rational decision about what's best for this company." I turned to address the entire board. "I understand your concerns about leadership, but ask yourselves this: who really knows quantum text technology? Who understands where we're going and how to get there? The person who created our core technologies or the person who's been trying to take credit for them?" The board members exchanged glances. Patricia Morrison, our longest-serving member, cleared her throat. "Mrs. Chen, Rachel, why reveal this now? Why not continue as R.C. Wong?" I thought about David, about our late-night conversations about the future, because David was right. The world needs to know that innovation doesn't look like what they expect. That breakthrough ideas can come from anyone, regardless of their gender, their background, or whether they fit the tech industry's preconceptions. I pulled up one final document, the last email David had sent me just hours before the accident. "My brilliant Rachel, if anything ever happens to me, don't let them push you into the shadows. Show them who you really are. Show them what we built together. All my love, David." "I spent 5 years hiding who I am," I said quietly. "I won't do it anymore. This company needs leadership that understands both its technology and its potential. I am that leader, whether you choose to accept it or not." James stood up abruptly. "This is all very theatrical, but it doesn't change the fact that I have the board's support." I moved to call for an immediate vote on my proposal to purchase Rachel's shares. I smiled. "Actually, James, I don't think you do have the board's support. Not anymore." Marcus Chen was already shaking his head. Not after this. Rachel, or R.C. Wang, has been the driving force behind every major advancement we've made. We'd be fools to let her go. Other board members nodded in agreement. James looked around the room, watching his carefully constructed plan crumble. "This isn't over," he said, gathering his papers. "I'll have my lawyers review everything. If there's even a hint of impropriety, of backdated documents or falsified records, you'll find everything in order." I cut in. "David and I were very careful with our documentation. But by all means, have your lawyers look. While they do, I'll be focusing on completing Project Phoenix's global rollout, unless you'd like to explain to our shareholders why you're trying to force out the person who actually developed it." He stormed out of the boardroom, leaving a heavy silence behind. Patricia Morrison was the first to speak. "I think we've all underestimated you, Rachel. Some of us for years. I thought about all the board meetings I'd sat through quietly, all the times I'd listened to James and others dismiss or minimize my husband's, our achievements. Yes, I said simply, you have. The question is, what are you going to do about it now?" The weeks following my revelation were a whirlwind of change. News of R.C. Wang's true identity hit the tech world like a tsunami. The media couldn't get enough of the story. The grieving widow who turned out to be a secret tech genius. The woman who had revolutionized quantum computing while letting others take the credit. "Mrs. Chen," a reporter from Tech Weekly asked during my first public interview, "why maintain the deception for so long? Weren't you angry about not getting credit for your work?" I sat in my office, David's old office, looking at his picture on the desk. "It was never about credit," I said. David and I knew how the tech world would react to a female Asian developer, especially one married to the CEO. We wanted our work to be judged on its merits, not clouded by prejudice or assumptions. The reporter nodded. "And your brother-in-law? Sources say he's challenging the authenticity of your work." I smiled, thinking of James' increasingly desperate attempts to discredit me. His lawyers had spent weeks combing through every line of code, every patent filing, every piece of documentation. "James is welcome to his doubts," I replied. "The code speaks for itself." What I didn't mention was the email I'd received that morning from James's lawyers, quietly withdrawing their challenges. They'd found nothing, because there was nothing to find. Every innovation, every breakthrough had been meticulously documented, jointly credited to David and me from the start. The real surprise came a week later, when I arrived at the office to find Marcus Chen waiting with an unusual request. "The development team wants you to do a code review," he said, looking slightly embarrassed. "In person. They've been working with R.C. Wang's documentation for years, but now they want to learn directly from you." I spent the afternoon in the development lab, surrounded by engineers who had once seen me only as the CEO's wife. Their respect wasn't grudging or forced. It was earned, line of code by line of code, as I walked them through the systems I'd designed. "It all makes sense now," one young developer said. "The elegant solutions, the innovative approaches, they had your signature all along. We just didn't know to look for it." That evening, as I was preparing to leave, Patricia Morrison appeared in my doorway. "The board has been discussing the future of quantum tech," she said without preamble. "We'd like to make your position as CEO permanent." I looked up from my computer, where I'd been reviewing the latest Project Phoenix tests, and James has resigned from the board, effective immediately. She smiled slightly. "His last attempt to challenge your work backfired rather spectacularly. Turns out several of his own innovations were actually based on incomplete copies of your prototypes." I wasn't surprised. James had always been better at taking credit than creating something original. "There's something else," Patricia continued. "We've had inquiries from several major tech companies about potential collaborations. It seems R.C. Wang's reputation carries even more weight now that people know the full story." I thought about David, about our dreams for quantum tech. "What kinds of collaborations?" "Google wants to discuss quantum-enhanced machine learning. Microsoft is interested in integrating Project Phoenix into their cloud security. And SpaceX," she paused for effect, "wants to talk about quantum communications for their Mars mission." I looked at David's picture again, remembering our late-night conversations about the future of technology. He had always pushed me to think bigger, to see beyond current limitations. "Schedule the meetings," I said. "But make it clear, I'll be representing quantum tech as myself." No more shadows, no more hiding. The next month was a blur of meetings, presentations, and negotiations. I spoke at tech conferences, did interviews with major publications, and began mentoring programs for young women in STEM. The story of R.C. Wong became a rallying cry for change in the tech industry. James, meanwhile, had disappeared from public view. The last I heard, he was trying to start his own tech company, but investors were wary. It turned out his reputation for taking credit for others' work had spread. 1 year to the day after my revelation in the boardroom, I stood on stage at the World Technology Summit, preparing to unveil Project Phoenix's global launch. The audience was packed with industry leaders, investors, and media. Quantum computing isn't just about processing power. I began looking out at the sea of faces. It's about seeing possibilities others miss, about having the courage to pursue solutions that seem impossible. I clicked to the first slide, a picture of David and me in our garage where we'd built our first quantum prototype. This is where quantum tech really began, I continued. Not in a fancy lab or corporate office, but in a garage where two people dared to dream big. One of those people worked in the spotlight while the other stayed in the shadows. Today, we're bringing those innovations into the light. The presentation was a triumph. Project Phoenix's capabilities exceeded even the most optimistic predictions. Our stock price soared, and more importantly, we were changing the face of cybersecurity forever. After the presentation, as I was gathering my things, I found a note that had been slipped into my bag. It was from James. Rachel, I was wrong. About everything. I'm sorry. James. I folded the note and put it away. His apology meant little now, but at least he had finally seen the truth, that innovation doesn't care about gender, background, or appearances. It cares about brilliance, determination, and the courage to stand in the light. That evening, I sat in my home office, surrounded by the computers and equipment where David and I had spent so many happy hours working together. On my screen was the code for our next big project, a quantum AI system that could revolutionize medical research. You were right, David, I whispered to his picture. The world did need to know the truth, and now they do. I began to type, my fingers flying over the keyboard as new ideas flowed. But this time, I wasn't hiding behind a pseudonym or working in the shadows. I was Rachel Chen, CEO of Quantum Tech, writing code that would change the world. And I was finally, completely myself. The crystal champagne glasses clinked around me as I stood in my family's grand ballroom, my hand tightly gripping Daniel's. The annual Harrison Foundation Gala was in full swing, Boston's elite mingling and networking in their finest evening wear. But all eyes were on us, or more specifically, on the simple silver band adorning my left hand. A teacher. My mother's perfectly painted lips barely moved as she hissed the word. Alexandra, please tell me this is some sort of joke. My name is Alexandra Harrison, and at 25, I was about to shatter my family's carefully constructed world. The Harrisons weren't just wealthy. We were old money, Boston aristocracy, with an investment firm that had been shaping the city's financial landscape for 3 generations. Daniel is a high school physics teacher, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the trembling in my chest. And we're getting married in June. My father's face darkened as he looked Daniel up and down, taking in his rented tuxedo and modest watch. To Charles Harrison IE, these weren't just fashion choices. They were damning evidence of what he considered a fatal flaw, being poor. Outside, now, my father's command cut through the ambient chatter of the gala. Without waiting for a response, he turned and strode toward his study, my mother following in his wake. Daniel squeezed my hand. Want me to come with you? I shook my head, forcing a smile. I need to handle this alone. The walk to my father's study felt like a march to the executioner's block. The sounds of the gala faded behind me as I made my way down the familiar hallway, past the portraits of Harrison patriarchs who had built our family's legacy. My grandfather's stern face seemed to judge me from his gilt frame as I passed. Inside the study, my father stood behind his massive mahogany desk, the same desk where he taught me about investment strategies when I was 12. My mother perched on the leather sofa, her champagne glass now filled with something stronger. Have you completely lost your mind? My father's voice was quiet, which was always more dangerous than his shouting. A public school teacher. Do you have any idea what this will do to our reputation? Daniel is brilliant, I said, standing my ground. He's dedicated to his students, passionate about education. Passionate about our money, you mean? My mother interjected. Really, Alexandra, how naive can you be? The irony of her words almost made me laugh. If they only knew that Daniel had tried to talk me out of the engagement when he learned about my family's wealth, worried that it would change our relationship. He doesn't want our money, I said firmly. In fact, he's the one who suggested a prenup. My father scoffed. Of course he did. He's playing the long game, making himself look noble. I wasn't born yesterday, Alexandra. No, I agreed, feeling a surge of courage. You were born into wealth and privilege, just like I was. But Daniel built himself up from nothing. He worked his way through college, earned his master's degree while teaching full-time. Spare us the Hallmark movie plot, my mother cut in. This isn't about his inspiring backstory. This is about the future of the Harrison name. The future? I felt my careful composure starting to crack. You mean the future where I take over Harrison Investment Group and marry someone from your approved list of suitable bachelors? Someone like Thomas Wellington Ivy, perhaps? My father's eyes narrowed. Thomas would be an excellent match. The Wellington Group's merger with Harrison would create one of the largest investment firms on the East Coast. I don't love Thomas. Love. My father spat the word like it was poison. You think love built this? He gestured to the room around us, to the wealth that had defined our family for generations. Strategy built this. Smart alliances. Understanding your place in the greater scheme. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I'm marrying Daniel. I don't need your approval, but I'd like your blessing. My father walked around the desk, stopping directly in front of me. If you marry that man, you are no longer a Harrison. No trust fund, no inheritance, no position at the firm. You'll be cut off completely. Is that what you want? The threat hung in the air between us. The Harrison Trust Fund wasn't just money. It was security, opportunity, power. Walking away from it meant starting from nothing. I lifted my chin, meeting his gaze. Yes, if those are my options. Alexandra, my mother stood up, her voice taking on the wheedling tone she used when she wanted something. Think about what you're doing. You've worked so hard, gotten your MBA, prepared to take over the firm. Would you throw all that away for some teacher? I'm not throwing anything away, I said. I'm choosing my own path. Then you choose it with nothing, my father said coldly. Harrison Investment Group will never be yours. You'll never see a penny of your trust fund. You want to live like common people. Fine, get out. My mother gasped. Charles. No, Margaret, she's made her choice. He turned his back on me, walking to the window. You have until morning to clear out your things from the house. After that, you're no longer welcome here. I stood there for a moment, waiting for them to change their minds, to show some sign that their love for me was stronger than their pride. But my father remained at the window, and my mother simply sank back onto the sofa, lifting her glass to her lips with a trembling hand. Goodbye then, I said softly, turning to leave. At the door, I paused. You know, Grandfather used to tell me that true wealth isn't about money. It's about having the courage to build something meaningful. My father's shoulders stiffened, but he didn't turn around. I walked back to the ballroom, where Daniel was waiting anxiously. One look at my face told him everything he needed to know. I'm so sorry, Alex, he said, pulling me close. We don't have to do this. Your future, your family's company. I silenced him with a kiss, not caring about the scandalized whispers around us. You are my future. The rest we'll build together. We left the gala without saying goodbye to anyone. As we drove away from my family's estate in Daniel's beat-up Honda Civic, I watched the lights of my childhood home fade in the rearview mirror. I should have felt scared, starting over with nothing but my education and determination. Instead, I felt strangely free. What my parents didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had been preparing for this possibility. The past 3 years, while working at Harrison Investment Group, I had been developing my own investment strategy, focusing on emerging technologies and sustainable energy. I had also been building connections, quiet ones, with people who saw the future the same way I did. I had $50,000 saved in a private account, not much by Harrison standards, but enough to start something. And I had an idea, one that would either prove my parents absolutely right about me or show them just how wrong they'd been. Daniel pulled up to our small apartment, my new home. Are you sure about this? He asked one more time. It's not too late to go back. I looked at him, this brilliant, kind man who taught physics to inner city kids because he believed education could change lives, who had supported my dreams even when they seemed impossible. I've never been more sure of anything, I said. Besides, they didn't just give me an ultimatum, they gave me a challenge. A challenge? I smiled, thinking about the plan that was already forming in my mind. They think I can't succeed without their money and connections. Fine. I'll build something bigger than Harrison Investment Group ever was. And I'll do it my way. Little did I know then just how prophetic those words would prove to be. The next 10 years would test everything I believed about myself, about business, and about what it means to create true wealth. But that night, sitting in Daniel's old car, holding the hand of the man I loved, I felt nothing but excitement for the journey ahead. What I didn't realize was that this journey would eventually lead me right back to Harrison Investment Group, but not in the way anyone could have predicted. 10 years can change everything. I sat in my corner office on the 50th floor of a gleaming downtown skyscraper, looking at the email that had just appeared in my inbox. The subject line read, Harrison Investment Group seeking strategic partnership. You need to see this, my CFO, Sarah Chen, said from the doorway. She walked in, tablet in hand. Harrison Investment Group's financials just went public. They're in worse shape than we thought. I took the tablet, scanning the numbers. The story they told was grim. Harrison Investment Group, once the crown jewel of Boston's financial district, was hemorrhaging clients. Their old-school investment approach had failed to adapt to changing markets. They'd missed the tech boom, dismissed sustainable energy as a passing fad, and clung to traditional investments until it was too late. Their stock has dropped 60% in the last year, Sarah continued. They're looking for a buyer. I leaned back in my chair, memories flooding back. 10 years ago, I'd walked away from that company, from my inheritance, with nothing but determination and a dream. Now, as CEO of Phoenix Ventures, I controlled a $500 million investment firm that specialized in exactly the kinds of innovative technologies my father had dismissed. Alex? Sarah's voice snapped me back to the present. What do you want to do? I looked out my window at the Boston skyline. Somewhere out there, my father was probably sitting in his study, trying to figure out how it had all gone wrong. Set up a meeting, I said. But not with my father. I want to meet with the board directly. The last decade had been a whirlwind. After leaving my family, I'd thrown myself into building Phoenix Ventures from the ground up. Starting with my saved $50,000, I'd focus on identifying promising tech startups and sustainable energy companies that traditional firms overlooked. Daniel had supported me every step of the way, taking extra tutoring jobs to help with our living expenses while I got the company off the ground. We lived in a tiny apartment, saved every penny, and slowly built our dream. My first big break came 2 years in, when one of our early investments, a small solar technology company, was bought by a major energy corporation. The return was substantial enough to attract serious investors, and from there, Phoenix Ventures grew exponentially. We had our struggles, of course. The first few years were lean, and there were nights I lay awake wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. But with each success, each correct market prediction, our reputation grew. I never used the Harrison name to open doors. As far as the business world was concerned, I was just Alexandra Chen, having taken Daniel's last name when we married. My success was my own, built without my family's connections or influence. Now, a decade later, Phoenix Ventures was known for its forward-thinking investment strategy and impressive returns. We had offices in 3 cities, a team of brilliant analysts, and a portfolio that read like a who's who of emerging technologies. And my father's company wanted to talk about a strategic partnership. The meeting was set for the following week. I arrived early, walking into the Harrison Investment Group's boardroom for the first time in 10 years. The portraits of past CEOs still hung on the walls, my grandfather, my father, and the empty space where my portrait should have been. The board members filed in, many of them the same men who had attended that fateful gala a decade ago. They didn't recognize me at first. Why would they? The Alexandra Harrison they remembered was a young heiress in designer dresses. The woman before them now was a successful CEO in a power suit, known for her shrewd business acumen. My father entered last, stopping short when he saw me. He had aged considerably, his hair now completely gray, new lines etched deeply around his mouth. For a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Recognition, shock, perhaps even pride. But it was quickly replaced by his usual mask of control. "What is this?" he demanded, looking at the board chairman. "Mr. Harrison," the chairman said carefully, "this is Alexandra Chen, CEO of Phoenix Ventures. They're interested in discussing acquisition terms." "Acquisition?" My father's face reddened. "You mean takeover? And you didn't think to inform me who would be attending this meeting?" "I asked them not to," I said, keeping my voice professional. "I wanted the board to hear our proposal without preconceptions." Sarah began presenting our offer, a fair but firm valuation of Harrison Investment Group, with terms that would protect the employees while transitioning the company into the modern era. As she spoke, I watched my father's face. I could see him struggling to reconcile the daughter he'd dismissed with the businesswoman before him. The numbers Sarah was presenting were impossible to argue with. Phoenix Ventures had the capital, the strategy, and the vision to save his company. When Sarah finished, there was a long silence. Finally, my father spoke, his voice rough. "May I have a moment alone with Ms. Chen?" The board members filed out, leaving us alone in the room where I'd spent countless hours learning about business at my father's knee. "You did all this to prove me wrong?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "No, Dad. I did this to prove myself right. Everything you taught me about business, about identifying opportunities, about building something lasting, I took those lessons and applied them to the future, not the past." He walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. "Your grandfather, he would have understood what you've built. He was an innovator too, in his time." He turned back to me. "I was the one who forgot that innovation is part of our legacy." "It's not too late," I said. "Phoenix Ventures doesn't want to dismantle Harrison Investment Group. We want to help it evolve, to honor its history while embracing the future." "And Daniel?" he asked. "Is he still?" "Still teaching physics," I said, allowing myself a small smile. "Still changing lives. We have 2 kids now, your grandchildren, but you've never met them. Emma's 7, Michael's 5. Something broke in my father's expression. "Alexandra, I know," I said softly. "Me too." The acquisition went through smoothly. The board voted unanimously to accept our offer, recognizing that Phoenix Ventures represented their best chance at survival. My father, to everyone's surprise, supported the decision. In the end, we didn't just save Harrison Investment Group. We transformed it. The combined companies, under the Phoenix Harrison Group banner, became one of the most influential investment firms in the country, known for balancing traditional wisdom with innovative strategy. My father stayed on as an advisor, though he stepped down as CEO. Slowly, cautiously, we began rebuilding our relationship. He and my mother met their grandchildren. They came to dinner at our house, not the mansion I could have afforded, but the comfortable home Daniel and I had chosen in a good school district. One evening, after a particularly successful quarter, my father and I were sitting in my office, looking out at the city lights. "You know," he said, "your grandfather used to say something about true wealth. Being about the courage to build something meaningful." I finished. "I remember." He nodded, looking at me with what I finally recognized as pride. "He would have been proud of you, Alexandra. We both are, even if I was too stubborn to see it sooner." I thought about the journey from that night at the gala to this moment, about all the lessons learned, the bridges burned and rebuilt, the legacy redefined. "The funny thing is," I said, "I'm not sure I would change anything. Every struggle, every setback, it all led to this. To building something that's truly mine, truly meaningful." My father was quiet for a moment. "You know, I always thought I was protecting our family's legacy. But you understood something I didn't. Legacy isn't about preserving the past. It's about building a better future." Later that night, as I drove home to Daniel and our children, I thought about wealth, real wealth, not the kind that sits in trust funds or hangs in portraits on boardroom walls, but the kind that comes from having the courage to follow your heart and the determination to build something meaningful. My children would inherit a different kind of legacy than the one I was born into. They would learn that true success isn't about what you're given, but what you build. That love is worth more than money, and that sometimes losing everything is the first step to gaining something better. As I pulled into our driveway, I saw Daniel teaching Emma about constellations in the backyard, Michael perched on his shoulders. The sight made me smile, remembering that night 10 years ago when I chose this life over my inheritance. It was the best investment I ever made.